All right. And then,
Mm.
Shanali, I would say whenever you think we're
Oh,
ready.
okay. You want me to go?
I think
All
we
right.
can get started. May have some people join partway in, but that's okay too.
Mhm. So I want to welcome everybody who's here. We are talking about independence, which is a subject that is near and dear to all Montessorians. You know, it's kind of at the heart of what we do. Of course, there's the academic piece also, but the independence piece is something really special that goes through all of the levels and is really it's at the heart of Montessori, I feel, I guess, from my own opinion. So I'm going to start by talking about the lower elementary. Did the primary went yesterday or the day before? And so they talked about the same subject at the primary level. And so folks who are here that attended the other one might be able to see some of the similar strains that run through even starting at the primary level. Okay, so I wanted to share a quote with you, and I'm noticing that there's some people on here that also go to the parenting class, so this won't be new for you if you go to the parenting class. It's one of my favorite quotes, and it's by Dreikers. He's one of the psychologists who was involved with the positive discipline movement. And this particular quote to me was really meaningful and a little bit intense. So just, you know, a disclaimer that I found it a little emotional. Okay, so the quote goes, "We cannot protect our children from life. Therefore, it is essential that we prepare them for it." And I think that right now, especially, there's a lot of emotions going, you know, around the parent community and the greater community in general. You know, there's a lot of worry about what our town is like, what our country is like, what the world is like, from all different perspectives. And so being a parent myself, I've experienced that the joy of parenting goes hand in hand with the worry of parenting. And so this quote reminds me that it's not my job to you know, surround my child or any child with pillows and protect them from the world, but to prepare them for that. And the independence work that we do in the Montessori classroom is just scaffolding them to be independent, thoughtful adults. So one of the things in the lower elementary that we do that I think is really, really good for the age is that we have the freedom of movement in the classroom. And what that means for a first, second, third grade student is that they get to listen to their own body and tell and decide when they need to use the bathroom, when they need to get a drink of water, if they need food, or, you know, whatever need they might have. They get to learn to listen to their body and to take care of that. You know, there's a lot of there's some other school systems where children have to like ask to use the bathroom, and that can be really hard for a young child to one get a no answer, you know, and have to not, you know, take care of a body need. And then also at the lower L age, they start to become aware of the social interactions, and sometimes they get embarrassed if they have to, you know, ask to take care of a body need, like going to the bathroom. So I really appreciate that they have the freedom, the ability to start learning to their own, or to listening to their own bodies and going to the bathroom when they need to. And it seems very simple, and as adults we might take it for granted, but that's a big thing for a young child. So I really, really am happy that I work in an environment where they can just take care of their needs whenever they want to. And it seems simple to us, but that listening to your body, you know, that's basic independence right there, you know, learning to do that. And then another thing that came to my mind that is pretty ubiquitous with Montessori in general is the self-correcting work. And the primary also has self-correcting work. We have a lot of these cards. I don't know if you can see them very well. I don't know if I do like the YouTuber thing of covering the back. But they're called nomenclature or 3-part cards. And what the children do with them is after getting a lesson on the topic, they read them, they look at them, they might, you know, if they're an emerging reader, they get help from a friend or from a teacher, which is a lovely connection piece too between the ages and the children. It's also another bit of independence too, is like knowing when to ask for help and who to ask for help when they need it, rather than just being told something. So they get these lessons, and these ones, these are roots. They kind of look like trees, and sometimes kids do them upside down because they look like trees in the fall, but they're roots, and these are on the parts of a root. And so the child gets a, you know, a lovely science botany lesson, and then we always bring in actual objects too. But then when they get these out, they come with a self-correcting piece. So after the child tries to read it and match them up, these particular ones have a little booklet with them, so then they can go and look and see, or if I can turn it the right way, they can see, you know, did they match up the right thing together, which is a really nice thing, and all of them are in here. Sometimes they come with a little book like this, and sometimes, like with this one that I have here, this is parts of a water lily. So then here they're learning, this is another botany one. We're doing a lot of botany stuff right now. With this one, it, you know, it highlights a part of the water lily. It has a label that goes with it. It has a definition that they can read, or get help reading. And then on the back, it has the self-correcting piece here. So then they have a way to check it out and to see how they did and make any corrections on their own. And they do these works more than once. They repeat them. So the more they do them, the more they are likely to get them correct and learn the scientific information, practice reading. And because they have the ability to correct their mistakes themselves, what they're learning is that with practice, they make less mistakes. With practice, that they get good at the information. And they're learning that on their own. So we don't have to tell them, hey, you did that wrong. What they discover is, hey, I'm not yet mastered at, I haven't yet mastered this. And so they keep working with it, which is just a little bit different way of looking at it. Both times, you know, they might make a mistake, but when they can do the self-correcting piece, you know, that intrinsic lesson is with hard work, I can do it. And I can ask for help when I need it. So we have a lot of those cards, and those cards start in primary at a much simpler level than what I just showed you. And then, checking the time, all right. Another piece of independence that I was thinking of showing you was the way that the kids plan their work. So in a traditional setting, or in a setting that most of us are familiar with, you get told what to do at what time. You know, take out your math, it's math time, math is over. Now it's time to do spelling, put your spelling away, now it's time for this. So in the Montessori setting, we do it differently, where the kids are actually involved in planning their own work and deciding what order they do their work in. So I brought some examples of planners. So this is an example of a planner that the first graders are using right now. And so it has all of the works down here, and they're color coded. There's a math section, there's a science section, and there's a language section. And they are they're in Latin, because we also do Latin. Just to throw that in. But so the kids know about these different sections, and so their job is to choose within this. They choose a math work, they choose a science work, they choose a language work. We talk a lot about building our brains in a balanced way. So the kids are not doing, you know, just language or just science or just math. So they use this as a way to make sure they're getting all the subjects in. At the beginning of the year, I write in for them what works to do, and then eventually that comes away, and then they start choosing. And the first grade one has pictures, and this is 1 day's worth. So the second and the third graders have a whole week on there. And so this is a like a medium level one where it has all of the days on there, and you can see that some of the works are gray, and those are the works that they start with for that day. They can do them in any order, but they start with for that day. And so what this is doing for them is helping them look at the whole week and how they can get to all of the different subject areas, and then they're building their balanced brain by getting a balanced practice of all the different subjects. And most of the time for second grade, they still plan in the morning for one day. In third grade, I forgot to bring their planner home, but it looks very similar to this with the color coding. But what it does is it doesn't have these gray areas on here. What it has is numbers by each of the works. And so it might say like this math work might say like 4 times next to it. And so then they go through it on Monday and they choose 4 days that they're going to practice that. So they're looking at planning their whole entire week with their planner. And then if they don't get to something, or they find something takes longer, or they want to change their plan later on, they can do that. They can move stuff around. And we do have them in the third grade level do that with the guidance of a teacher. But it's fine to change your plan and to move things around. And if you didn't get to something, pick another day in the week to get it done. And so with the third graders planning their whole week, that doesn't start at the very beginning of the year. Usually it starts, most of the third graders are right now at planning. I think that they're all planning their whole week right now, and we do scaffold that according to their personal independence level. So somebody who's brand new to Montessori might need more assistance with planning, and that's okay. And so how quickly they take to that and understand it is independent to the child, and we just help them with whatever amount of help that they need. Yeah. So that's all I have.
All right, so that means that it's my turn, and I'm going to start also talking with something that's kind of fundamental to the Montessori, ideal and process. It's also like, Shamali started with freedom of movement. This is again sort of a freedom of a choice kind of thing. In upper L, in most of Montessori, of course, they can choose what they want to work on and when, as opposed to science in the morning or whatever. It's also important that they get to choose who they work with for their things. So they're able to sort of find out for themselves what kind of workspace they need. Do they like to sit with somebody who they can sort of chat back and forth with, or do they want to sit with someone where they're both going to be perfectly silent and, just focused on their work? Being able to choose their own seatmates, change their own seatmates through the day as opposed to having assigned seats or things like that helps them sort of build some interpersonal skills. It helps them, figure out their own needs and work towards their own independence. And like in lower L, they can choose to work with different age levels so they can help each other with different things. The older kids might sit with some of the younger kids to help them with math. Right now, some of the fifth graders are just starting to get into fractions, where the sixth graders are sort of just moving out of that. So I'm seeing a lot of the sixth graders being like, oh, I can help you with that, which is really great for building the confidence of the sixth graders and helping the fifth graders know that if they're confused, they don't have to find an adult, they can find peers and things like that. Another peer-based thing that we do to help build independence, more social emotional, we do a lot of independent conflict resolution with our students. So there's a couple of things that we do to allow our students to solve their own conflicts with their peers. So that's really important, that they don't have to find an adult every time they have, a little argument or a tussle, emotional tussle. So they, there's a couple of different tools that we use to help them learn that skill. They can do a P-shell with another person, which is when, they sort of calm down one-on-one, sit with each other and you know, usually they pass an object back and forth, but we don't do that right now, of course. So they have a talking object that goes back and forth that, you know, so who's talking and who's listening, and a specific formalized procedure they go through to share what happened from their perspective, listen to the other person, make sure that there's no misunderstandings, and help them come up with solutions to solve whatever problem that they're having. We're also just now moving into, in Upper L, we've added in the wheel of choice, where they came up with a bunch of different things they can do when they're having an argument with a friend or they're having a conflict in the classroom. So they can, you know, it's not just P-Shell or find a teacher, but a whole bunch of different options that they came up with. So if they're having an issue, they can say, okay, I'm going to go to the wheel of choice. What's going to work best for me right now? You know, it gives them a whole list of options, so they don't have to, right in the moment where they're all freaked out and stressed out, they don't have to, you know, rely on their memory, which isn't going to be great at that moment. They have a preset list that they came up with of things that might help them solve the conflict. So all of these things help them, you know, sort of really grow into being able to deal with a lot of problems on their own, because some of the interpersonal stuff is the hardest stuff in life. So starting at this early age, to give them the independence to solve their own interpersonal conflicts instead of going to, you know, to me or Miss Tyrell or to some other adult on the playground or something to fix whatever issue, is really important for their growth. And just like in lower L, in upper L, we also have planners. They get way more independent in upper L with their planners. So it's no longer quite as color coded, right? You can see it's generally also a weekly planner. The highlighted ones are the things they're supposed to do every day. So multiplication tables, math problems, spelling, penmanship. And then the other subjects go along the side. Every Friday, I sit down and kind of go over what subjects they'll be having lessons in the next week. And so they fill in their lessons and they decide when they want to do follow-up. So they plan out for themselves along here. If they're like, oh, we're getting a history lesson on Tuesday, well, I guess I'll do my follow-up on Thursday because I want to do my science follow-up right after the lesson on Wednesday. So that helps them kind of plan out, all right, what am I doing each day? How do I make sure it's balanced? You know, and they're also, because they're choosing their own work partners and they do a fair amount of group work, they can sit with whoever they think they might be working with and go, okay, when are we going to do our history project? All right, I guess you have Thursday open. I also have Thursday open. Okay, we'll do it then. So they have a lot more control over this. They still check in with Rose or myself to make sure that they haven't forgotten anything. But for the most part, they fill this out all on their own. And they also start moving on to, you know, let's say something happens Tuesday, they get really involved in something and they miss, you know, doing the grammar that they had planned. They can say, all right, I'm going to look at the rest of my week. When can I move that grammar? So it's a living document each week. You know, it's very rarely you know, if they don't complete something, they can move it somewhere else. Or if they have a really great Tuesday and they end up finishing a bunch of stuff, they can say, well, Friday was looking a little crammed and I'd like to have some more time to work on something else on Friday. So I'll take the geometry I had planned, then move it over here. So it really helps them with their time management skills and you know, their independence to plan what needs to be done. For some kids, even in upper L, the weekly planner does get a little crowded and stressful for them. So I do have daily planners available. So they usually take 5 at a time and plan out their whole week. But then each day they only have to look at one document instead of looking at, you know, or look at one day instead of being like, oh no, but what about tomorrow and, you know. So for some kids, it's really helpful to say, okay, what am I doing today? Some kids like to sort of, you know, plan out even on, you know, what they're going to do first. But for some kids, it's a lot more fluid. And this document gives them the freedom to sort of decide, you know, am I going to go in order? Am I going to, you know, perfectly plan out, yes, I'm doing spelling first and then this, or just let it flow. So that's how the planners work in upper L.
Okay. So lastly, we're moving to middle school. And in the middle school, as they get older, of course, there is a lot more independence. And we talk a lot in the group how independence then also means responsibility and how those two things come together. And one of the biggest areas that really is shown is out on the farm. And oftentimes in talking with people, I find that a lot of people know that, the middle school students are involved in the farm and they work out on the farm, but they don't always realize just how much the students are independent in that project and how much of the work is very student centered. So from the very beginning of the year, the students actually apply for positions for jobs on the farm based on different skills and interest levels. And from there, they really become responsible for the tasks associated with those job descriptions. So the harvest manager plans what they're going to harvest each week, and then actually becomes the supervisor really of their peers during the harvesting. Who's going to be in the hoop house actually doing the harvesting, who's going to be in the kitchen. Although we haven't been in the kitchen, we've been working kind of with a makeshift outdoor kitchen this year. Doing the cleaning and the packaging and the measuring and making the labels and doing all that together. The marketing and customer service people are in charge of making sure that our flyers and our posters are put together, updated, any of the forms, manning the farm stand. So every piece is student-led. And the goal and really in creating the farm and in the way that it was to make it large enough so that it really needs the students. It cannot run without them. I cannot do it by myself by any means. And we saw in the spring, actually, when we had to go to distance learning, that we also can't do it one at a time. It really needs the group. And so there's some interdependence with that, but it also becomes very independent in that they run the daily operations as far as what needs to get done for weeding or watering. They are responsible for checking in and making sure those different things get done. They have substitutes if they need to. And then if the managers don't follow through or remember to complete a task, then it doesn't get done. And they can, look at solutions individually as well as within the group. And oftentimes when things come up during a harvest or during a specific planning piece, the students know that they can work together on how to figure that out, and they don't necessarily need me for that. And especially as the 8th graders grow into those positions, they really become the ones that run the planning meetings, figure out what we're going to order, get on the computer and place the orders. So they really become very independent with the farm, and it becomes a big work for them. The other piece, similar to in the elementaries, that we really continue to work with the students is the structure and organization of the day and their work, whether, their daily agendas within the classroom. So when they come in each day, we have a board that has our agenda for the day. So they know what time different things are happening, whether it be math lessons, group lessons, specials for that day. And then within that time frame, they can structure their day. They can figure out what they need to do, when they need to do it, what materials do they need, and how to, access the different timing. One of the other pieces that we really start to look at more individually for each student is the actual organizing of their specific materials. So we start out in the 7th grade year, especially with kind of a predetermined organizational system. So their binders are organized by subject, and everything is color coded. And it's probably easiest to see kind of by looking at the side here, but every subject has a different color. And so as they are getting worksheets and whatnot, everything is that color. and then they really become responsible for making sure that that binder has what they need in it. And in the classroom, we have an example binder that also has everything. So then they become much more independent on making sure that their personal binder is organized. And also, if they misplace something or they lose a work or they forgot something at home, they also become responsible to take it upon themselves to look at the example binder, write down some notes, make a copy if they need something, and figure out kind of how are they going to do that. And then once they get a little bit further into the program, they can start to explore their own organizational styles. So this year I've got some students who are using more than one binder. So they've decided that they're going to have smaller binders and for each subject rather than just dividers. I've had years where students will use a homework folder and only take that and what they've specifically planned to do home on any given night. And then as it becomes obvious or we decide that a student needs different tools or materials or guidance, we'll provide that as well. So I've had years where a student, in order to really kind of be independent with their organization, has decided that instead of just dividers, they want pocket folder dividers. And so then, for each subject area, they had a different file, and the current work would go in there, and then the completed work would go in behind it. And so they're working from a predetermined organizational style that I'll give them at the beginning that works and fits, to then discover what works best and even better for them. And then the other place that the other thing that really comes in at this kind of organizational and timely kind of work organization level, and this is the piece that is probably the most difficult for parents, and especially parents of students moving from that 6th to 7th grade, is the independence to allow a student to fail. And I don't say fail in maybe the more traditional sense of we're all of a sudden giving them grades, or they're failing with a specific score or whatnot, but that at this developmental age, even a student who in 5th, 6th grade was flying through their planner, was always on top of things, was always organized and ready to go, the development of the brain as they hit that 7th grade age often will change a lot. And you may have a student who blows homework off for a night or two, and then they regret not being prepared for a group lesson or a discussion. And allowing that to happen often, I see teach kind of the students the best lessons on how to be independent, how to work through that, how to make a plan to come out on the other side of that, and really see the most growth there. We still use planners in middle school. We use them in a slightly different way though. So what I do at the beginning of each week, and mostly because the workload and the expectations, they definitely jump as the students hit middle school. They're ready for it, but they get a checklist every week at the beginning of the week, and it's split into things due this week and things due next week. And so they are starting to look at at least a 2-week planning period, if not a little bit more. Every once in a while, we'll have projects that are even more lengthy than that, where they'll know, okay, this week I'm doing some research, then I'm writing a first draft, then I'm doing a next draft, then I'm putting together a presentation, then I'm, handing in a final project. But this allows them to start to really practice and have some independence around due dates. And so things having specific times that they're due. And then from that document, the students are welcome to use planners in any way they want. So I have multiple different kinds in the classroom that I start out with at the beginning of the year. just simply, you know, topics and what days are you going to work on those things. And then they tend to get very specific. So this one, you know, a student wanted some more priorities. So it says like, okay, in the morning care, you know, what are my first couple priorities? At home, what are my priorities? You know, what am I going to be working on? And almost all of the planners that we have available in the classroom have been created between me and a student working together, or a couple students, where they say, you know, I feel like I need to be able to do this to plan my time and plan my work. So one student just kind of wanted like a calendar. You know, I have a bunch of things after school. I need to remember to put in my dance class, and I need to remember to put in my soccer practice, and I need to remember this. And so that calendar really helps to figure out, you know, when do I even have time, not even just at school, but in my life. This next one looks like it has a ton written on it, which it does. But I had a year where a couple students were like, we see the due dates and we get what's going on, but we just don't know how to figure out how to put that into a priority list each day. And so this just describes, okay, on Monday, you know, your first priority is to make sure that you're ready for Monday. Like, do you have the history ready for that day? And then, yes, okay, move on to step 2. And then we have a similar one to that that's just blank, where it just says priority 1, priority 2. And then this one is very specific to a student who had a very specific schedule, where they had different days that they were not in school in the afternoon because they were going to different activities, or where we had different things in the classroom where we had specials. And then they knew they had certain blocks in the evening to do work. And so they wanted to make sure that they were able to put that together. They knew that they had like play practice, or they were going to the Y on certain days. And so each time we work within the students in the hopes of teaching them that there's not one way to plan that works for everybody, and then getting them prepared that as they move to high school, kind of no matter what that high school schedule looks like, that they can figure out how to make a plan that works for them. So that is kind of a snapshot of independence and some planning within the classroom. And I think Shaunalee had a little closing for us as far as informational things. And then we will absolutely open it up to questions, comments, discussion. And people can feel free to start typing some questions into the chat if you'd like and you don't want to forget them. Or you can just unmute yourself and holler them out as we get ready.
So I wanted to end our little segment with a Montessori quote. If you've been around me any amount of time, you know that I really like quotes. I kind of collect them and I use them as, like, you know, mantras as I go through my day. And this is one that you probably have heard before. So it's an oldie but a goodie. So this is by Maria Montessori. The greatest gifts that we can give our children are the roots of responsibility and the wings of independence. Yeah. So I'm happy to answer questions or talk about anything that came up to you guys while you were listening.
Even if it's not about independence, if you feel like you've been dying to ask something about
anything at all.
I can ask a question. So Samantha, you mentioned about the farm. Sometimes just if somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do, and just letting that play out and see where that goes. And I was thinking about that more in the context of homework too. Like, how much do you recommend that parents let that play out versus helping to provide some of that structure at home?
Yeah, so and mostly in our lower and upper L, we don't see a lot of homework coming home. So this really is more of a middle school thing for most of our students. But one of the biggest things that I always try to recommend to parents is that the best thing that you can do at home is have a specific time and a place that is set aside. So we ask that the students spend usually about 60 to 90 minutes a night on schoolwork. And so, maybe it's not the exact same time every night if you know that, on Tuesdays and Thursdays you have an activity, and so it's going to happen at 7 o'clock on those nights, but on other nights it's going to happen from 5 to 6:30 right before dinner. Or so having kind of a set thing where the students know that, you can't have the TV on during that time, you can't have, your video games on, you can't have, there's not going to be other things happening during that time, that's your quiet schoolwork time. And then at that point, if the students decide to sit there and draw for the whole 90 minutes and not do their homework, then they then can deal with that when they come in the next day and they're, not prepared for something. We often find that they learn fairly quickly that kind of instant gratification in the evening of like, I don't really want to do that, puts a little pressure on them the next day or a couple days later when they don't have their literature book read or they don't have, and they can't participate in what we're doing. It's not always, immediate. It's not a one-time thing usually where, they blew something off one time and then they're, perfect for the rest of that. But as we go through kind of the process of middle school, I often see that a lot of just that kind of natural having to deal with it really, really helps them. And hopefully you don't mind me sharing this, but I think your example has been feeling that a little bit this week.
You can tell why I've asked the question.
So today at the end of the day, it was funny. I had said to one of our other students, Renee, I said, your math book is still on the shelf. You need to come and get it. And I had said the same thing to another gentleman in the class. And she said to me, oh, well, can I just leave it there for now? Because she was actually staying after school to work on schoolwork. And I said, yeah, that's fine. And he thought I was saying that to both of them. So he sat down and was like, oh, okay. I was like, no, you need to take your math book home. You have to do math tonight. Like, oh man, I thought I was getting out of it. I'm like, no, Renee can leave hers on the shelf because she's coming in at 3 o'clock to do her math here.
Yeah, good to know. He's going to be so mad that I tuned in for this call.
So my son went through the middle school too. My son actually went through all the levels and he's now in high school. But homework was an interesting thing. I have found, and I don't know if this is true for all children, but when he would go and do homework in his room, it was a lot less effective because it's his comfy place, his safe zone. Pretty soon he'd be reading a book, because that's his favorite thing to do ever. He would just read books forever, which great, but also there's other things. So he actually, his best place to do homework was a place that was a little less cozy, but still kind of set aside for it, even if it's, the table that's prepared. So I was able to help facilitate that for him, so that then he could be more independent, just because, I know him, know your audience.
Yeah. And I would say that, time and place can definitely play a role. Finding that thing, some kids can sit on their bed and do homework and they're fine. And
some can't.
And others that is just not going to happen. They need to be at the dining room table so that it feels like, a little bit more serious time frame. So that's definitely, a little bit different group to group. But then at this age, I really do encourage parents, yes, you can help and, especially if they're asking or whatnot, but not to feel like they ever need to fight with their child about, well, you didn't do this and you didn't do that. And so
I tried to keep the word facilitating in mind. So I'm facilitating and I'm there to support him, but I like Sam said, like not fight.
Yeah, so Kate just had put in, if you're not able to necessarily look at the chat while you're also on the video, talking about she teaches in a high school setting and how they often see a lot of students who still really struggle with this ability to plan and prioritize their time, and how to do what. And it's not to say that every student leaving Montessori is going to be 100% at this. It's often still a lifelong skill of, how to prioritize your time and how to plan and how to kind of do some of these executive functioning skills. But we often hear that type of comment a lot, as far as our students feeling more prepared to make those choices and decisions, and having more success with knowing what works for them.
Mm-hmm. And just having had the prior experience when they're younger, even if they're not perfect, at least they've had the experience. So they're not getting to college for, say for the first time on their own with classes, having to figure out time management, priorities, and and weigh that against all of the other, social fun stuff that is also going on at college. So at least they've had the practice, they understand the basic, philosophy of time management and planning, and they've experienced it. So I think that that's really, really helpful to set that foundation for the future, even if they're not perfect, because none of us are. And at each phase of our life, we have new challenges and new distractions and new priorities too, as we go through different phases. And school is honestly not always a kid's priority at certain phases of their life. Yeah.
Suddenly you just dropped a bombshell.
I know. Surprise.
Okay.
Timmy,
I'm sorry, it's a
a
little bit, yes, I just wanted to say I have to come hide somewhere because the kids are killing each other right now. It's, everyone wants me, it's bedtime. But thank you so much for the presentation. And I just wanted to share with you that regarding the little ones' independence, like, so David is 5 years old, and he had a lot of anxiety about going to the bathroom by himself at the school. So he had some runny stomach a couple of times, and I think it was part of the reason why he had it was that he just got so stressed out because but then the way his teacher handled everything, so respectfully, and he realized that he can trust his teachers, and it's all good. And now he learned it. I helped him, you can do it by yourself, you can take care of yourself, you are a big boy and your teachers are always there to help. And it's just, it just happened a couple of days ago that he came home, he was like, I pooped at the school. I'm sorry about sharing this, but it's such a relief for all of us. And he was so happy to share that he did it, and he wiped himself. And it's, Tommy was much younger, when I think he was like 3.5, and he could already like wipe his butt. But with David, it's a little bit different, but it's a big accomplishment. So thank you. Sorry that I'm sharing this, but it's just means a lot for him and for us too. So I think I'm gonna say goodbye and thank you. I'm gonna get back to the chaos to put everyone to bed.
Have a good night, Timmy.
Night. Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Yeah. It is true that often those things that might seem little really can be can be huge for the kids, and like Shonali talked about. And I still I'll still have students, especially outside on the playground, who obviously inside I'm only with the older students, and they don't usually ask. They're pretty good about realizing it at that point, they don't have to. But outside I often will get lower L students, and even upper L students, especially if they're newer to the school, who will ask, oh, Ms. Milhorn, I need to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, go, you
Go.
never have to ask. Like that's why we have the bathroom outside. Like you don't even have to go inside, and so just that idea that they really do have that level of autonomy sometimes surprises them.
Mhm.
Kind of an interesting thing that I think some of the rest of us take for granted. But yeah, any other questions, thoughts, things we can highlight for independence?
I mean, having Caitlin in your classroom, Sam, is fabulous, and I absolutely love the letting them fail. I mean, not that I don't love my daughter dearly, but it's and not that it still doesn't come back to bite me, because somehow if she forgets to do it, somehow it's my fault still, and I'm like, we had an example last night. She was in like an utter panic looking for something in the Book Thief, and Mike and I are like, you've never read the book, why would we know this? And it was just like blew her mind, and I'm just like, is it in the front of the book, is it in the back of the book? And she was just wigging out. Yeah. But eventually we were able to help her out, and everything calmed down. But yeah, it was that like utter chaotic panic. Why don't you know this? I'm like, never read the book, so sorry.
Yeah. Well, and I'm good. I'm kind of glad, because sometimes, I almost even have to create those things. So that was a work that she had finished and handed in already. And I gave it back to her and I said, but you didn't find the quotes, and there's no page numbers, and I said, you have to go back. And it was a whole packet of all this stuff. And she had done all this other stuff except this one little part at the end. And I was like, no, it's not done. Like, you got to go back and you got to do it all the way. And so I think sometimes, even that little bit, especially for the students who, are like, oh yeah, this is done. And not that that's Caitlin, but just in general in the classroom, is kind of those added kind of, amp it up a little bit so that they have those expectations, and that they realize that the expectations are going to grow. And that's another thing around, somewhat around independence, but really within the classroom that I enjoy, is that I really have that flexibility to push students on all their different levels. And I think Shonali and Michelle would definitely, do the same thing. And even in the lower grades, is that we're able to, push any student to kind of their level.
Well, and the independence piece, you could think of it as personal freedoms or independence, but it's so closely linked to responsibility that it really, I think, helps the kids develop in a really balanced way. So they're not just getting to do whatever they want, but they are being able to make choices in their life that are meaningful, and they experience the responsibility that goes along with that. So like if you go back to my first example of the kids being able to use the bathroom whenever they want, well, they also clean the bathroom at the end of the day, so they learn after a while. Some of them learn quicker than others, that the way that they leave the bathroom and the way they treat it when they use it whenever they want affects them and everybody else also. So that independence piece goes right along with responsibility at all the levels.
Yeah, the going to the bathroom in my room, the responsibility tends to be when they decide they really have to go in the middle of a lesson, and then figuring out what they missed. Like, well, I don't know how to do this. But there's always at least one person that has to go in the middle of a math lesson. Yeah.
Are there any other big burning questions? You guys can try to stump us. I love the big hard questions.
Now you're just asking for it.
I know. I'm sorry.
Well, we won't make you say things or ask things if you're feeling like you've got things. But obviously know that you can reach out to us anytime.
Mhm. Yeah.
Thank you so
Well,
much. for
thank you guys.
Thank you. This
Thank
was
you.
Thanks for tuning in.
joining. All right.
Mhm.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Have
Have
a
a really wonderful night.
Yes, and a great
Yeah.
Friday. And then in case you didn't know, I had somebody who did not know today. Tomorrow's the last day before vacation. We have all of next week off.
But you guys have all of next week off.
Yeah, I had somebody tell me their student was going to be gone Monday and Tuesday and they needed the work they were going to miss. Oh, you're in luck.
The one time we get the whole week and we're not traveling.
I know.
Yeah, I know.
We're hoping that this will continue in our calendar, so can use it in the future.
Yeah, I also love that GSB did it last year. And, the neighbors were trying to play with Caitlin and Dylan who are in school, and now they're not doing it this year. And I'm just like, oh.
Well, they were supposed to do it this year.